Hi, I'm Scott Stuber, head of original film at Netflix and an alum of the School of Theater, Film, and Television at the University of Arizona. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 edition of I Dream in Widescreen. Some of you are no strangers to this event. This annual world premiere of thesis films from the U of A School of Theater, Film, and Television is one of the hottest events in Southern Arizona. But this year, you'll experience not only the world premiere of 14 incredible short films from our talented 2020 graduating class, but also an exclusive series of conversations featuring my esteemed fellow alumni working in all areas of the business. The University of Arizona School of Theater, Film, and Television has long generated new filmmaking voices and industry leaders. This school is like a best-kept secret. Located a quick flight from Hollywood and a 1-hour drive from the Mexican border, it has been quietly funneling talent into the business for years. As an example, today you'll get to meet sought-after casting director Edie Belasco, who honed her skills beside me for many years at Dirtbags before she cast the likes of Transparent and Sorry to Bother You. WME partner Brad Slater, who reps talents like Octavia Spencer and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and YouTube sensation Darius Britt, among many others. Film and television students graduate from U of A with a distinctive point of view. They get a solid foundation in the history of film, in the business, and in all things technical, and they learn how to work together. Despite a challenging year, the filmmakers and future leaders in the class of 2020 adapted, got resourceful, got scrappy, and they brought their visions to life. I am so proud to share their films with you and to have you meet my incredible alumni colleagues over the course of these 2 days. First up, we're sharing a conversation between Lindsay Utz, the editor of this year's Academy Award-winning documentary, American Factory, as well as Miss Americana, and Tyler Gillett, director of the upcoming film Scream 5. I Dream in Widescreen all starts now, right here on your YouTube channel.
So we graduated the same year, right? We were both
Yeah, we did.
2004.
But you were, I think you were BFA and I was BA. Is that right?
Okay, I think so.
It was, I was super into production in college, and I loved that we all got to work on each other's projects. I think I did still photography for your thesis film. Is that right?
Yeah, which one were you? Was that Animal Automaton or Snow?
Animal Automaton. And then we made a documentary together.
I feel like we shot a couple things, right? We did something in Nogales, and then we made that doc about the crematorium, Belinda.
You were the DP on my, was that my final, I don't know, senior project or something?
Yeah, I guess so. But so right out of school though, what brought you, did you jump right into the craft? What was your sort of step out of school onto the kind of path, I guess?
Yeah, I'm actually glad we're doing this because I feel like we lost touch for many years, and
yeah.
I don't know exactly how you got to where you are now. But my first job out of college was as the video editor on Semester at Sea. And I was the youngest staff member. I was almost like the same age as the college students that ride on the ship around the ocean. It's a study abroad program on a ship. And they hired 2 people, a videographer and an editor, to do a voyage video. And so my first job out of college was as the editor of the voyage video for one of these Semester at Sea voyages. And I had an edit bay at the bottom of the ship. And we, and in this, they were shooting on beta tapes. So I had like big beta decks, and we were floating through the Pacific Ocean as I was cutting this voyage video, which they sell to the parents for like $100 a pop after,
Right. It's like a yearbook.
It's like a yearbook. And I mean, that was my first documentary. It was like 60 minutes. And really the one goal of that film was to make sure each student appeared at least once in it so that, they could sell it to as many kids. But it was an amazing job because here I was floating around the Pacific, editing a film. So right out of college, I just, I didn't get like a traditional job. But then when I moved to Portland, I tried getting a traditional job, and I lasted 1 day at a real estate firm that was making videos for the homes that were for sale. And I remember my
one
boss,
day.
Well, because my boss was like, listen, you're going to get a voiceover file and then a bunch of still photos of the house. It doesn't even matter if they're talking about the bathroom. You can show the living room, whatever. It doesn't matter. And so my job was to like put together real estate videos. And at the end of the day, I just walked into his office and I said, this isn't for me. I'm really sorry. This isn't the right fit. And so I lasted one day. And at that point, I decided that I didn't really want to wait around for people to give me an opportunity to do this or that. I wanted to just sort of create my own opportunities. So I knew I wanted to be in production. I loved production. I didn't know exactly, what aspect of production I wanted to be in, because I have always liked every aspect of it. I like making movies. And so I started my own nonprofit organization in Portland, Oregon, and I just started getting clients, and we were making short sort of promotional videos for nonprofit organizations. And it was super fun because I got to build teams and put together proposals and crews, and we would go out and shoot these interesting organizations and their work. And
right, and you weren't asking for permission. You didn't need anybody to tell you. Yeah,
no, I was just doing my own thing. And so I did that and caught the attention of a magazine, Good Magazine, which was this startup at the time.
Oh, that's right. And that brought you to LA, where our paths crossed again. I remember
exactly.
There was that project, that doc project.
Good Magazine hired me. This was like right when, Google bought YouTube and video was exploding on the web. So at Good, I helped found the video department, and we produced, while I was at Good, which was probably 6 or 7 years, we produced over 100 short pieces, including like a daily news show and a documentary series. We had a couple Sundance premieres actually with a couple of our pieces. And I was just running the video department. And I had a staff of 10 people. Eventually I moved from LA to New York. And I was overseeing all these series. And so while I was wearing a lot of hats, I was always drawn to the edit room because I felt like that was where there was like the least amount of bullshit. I didn't have to I didn't like getting stuck on these long calls,
Yeah, well, it's tactile. Like that's where that's like where the rubber meets the road. Like the storytelling, you only have what you have footage wise, and like that's where the real creation exists.
And I loved being in the edit room, and eventually that led me to meet a director who was working on a film about bullying, and I was kind of coming towards I was feeling ready for a change, and I said, can I edit your work sample, and I'll do it for free. I just want to prove to you that I'm a good editor, and you should consider hiring me to cut the film. And so he let me cut it for free. I moved back in with my parents. I was living in New York, so I packed up, moved back to Portland, sat on my parents' couch for 2 months and edited together this kind of work sample for this film. And they ended up using that as like the fundraising tool for the film, and they loved what I had done. So they hired me to cut the film, even though I had never cut a feature documentary, and I was coming from the internet world and from the world of short format films. And so that was my first film. And that film, Bully, had its premiere at Tribeca, and the Weinstein Company picked it up, and then it went on to be shortlisted for an Oscar. So that was my first project, feature-length project. And after that, and after the success of the film, I was able to, get jobs a lot easier.
Yeah.
So like my next job was much easier to get because I had already proved myself on that first film. And every film has gotten me further along. So, I feel fortunate to say that at this point in my career, I have the luxury of being picky, which is the best.
That's sort of the that's the feeling of, that's what I think the measure of success is for me is getting to choose, right? Getting to make the choice of which of the 3 projects you love the most and speaks to you the most. And
Yeah, but it takes a long time to get there.
Takes a long
It
time.
takes a long time to get there. And so tell me about, why don't you answer the same question? Because I feel like we lost track of each other after we graduated. So what was your path and how did you get
So, yeah, my path, it's funny. I think that a lot of things about, I think a lot of our stories is actually really similar. I left, when I left the U of A, I moved right out to LA. I had family out here. All of my extended family is from, LA adjacent areas. So there was a bit of a home base set up for me where I knew like I could stay at my grandparents' house for a little while I figured out what my first job was going to be. And, all of those kind of logistic things were just easier out here for me.
Right.
And my first job in LA was actually as a working in the asset library at New Line Cinema.
Oh,
I got
cool.
this weird job where I was barcoding original negative. So I was part of this like very, very like menial kind of task machine that it was all about just organizing and cataloging things. And while I was in that job, an assistant position opened up for one of the production executives at New Line. And
great.
I interviewed just on a whim, never thinking I would get it. And I got it. And I got it specifically because I had this real love of photography and cinematography. And my boss, who then became my boss, this woman named Dana Belcastro, who I'm still very, very close with. She also was really interested in photography, and she was an amazing boss. She I remember in my interview, she told me very, very frankly, she said, I don't want you, if I'm looking for an assistant, then I can actually push into a career that they want to be in. She said, I'm not interested in like grooming you to be a production executive. I want to be able to push you out of my office in a year into something else. And I was with her for like a year and 2 weeks, and true to what she had said, she kicked me out of her office, and I got a job as it was a camera PA at first, and then I became a loader on the Will Ferrell movie Semi-Pro.
Nice.
And that was my first like kind of feature job. But I was really hungry to be making stuff, and I was struggling with this like, okay, I'm clearly on this path to like being in the camera department and being a working DP, but those projects, I mean, that's a very territorial group of people, and that part of the craft is really hard to break into, and there's a lot, you have to ask a lot of permission to be a part of it. So while I was in this, this office job, basically, I was like financing my kind of creative education on my own by meeting people, and I was shooting and directing a lot of short films for the Upright Citizens Brigade and the Groundlings, and I was making friends and contacts that way, and so it was working a job during the week and then shooting on the weekends. And so those things were sort of happening simultaneously. And then after Semi-Pro, after that movie wrapped, I had built up this like network of connections and started really directing and shooting full time. I kind of skipped the step of like climbing up the hierarchy of the camera department and started DPing small TV shows and DPing a ton of little short films, and I sort of found like that those two things were really married for me, like the work behind the camera and as a DP, and my interest in directing were always like kind of crisscrossing. And
but so much of our story is similar, because I also skipped, a lot of editors are assistants and then work their way up to becoming full editors. And I completely skipped that step because I just went straight into production. And because I was producing and editing all these short films myself, when I did get the opportunity to work on a fiction film, I was like, no way am I assisting. I'm already 10 years into my career. I'm not gonna do that. There was definitely a bit of a learning curve to jump from short format to feature cutting, but it sounds like we both kind of skipped that middle part, which I honestly think I think it's overrated to like work your way up.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that you have to create your own opportunities and your own, you have to decide what you love and go for it and create situations where you're not asking permission to do the thing you want to do. You're just doing it.
Yeah, and that you're taking a risk on the thing that you like, this like bully, like VHS was my first kind of Sundance
and I
thing.
followed you when you I was following you on Facebook when you guys premiered that, and I was so impressed.
Yeah, but it was so and I guess things really sort of came together for me when I hooked up with Matt Bettinelli-Open and Chad Villella, who are still my business partners today. They had a little sort of, it wasn't sketch, it was like short form comedy. They had a YouTube channel called Chad, Matt, and Rob. Mm-hmm. And I worked with Matt at New Line. He was the office manager while I was an assistant there.
Oh, cool.
And he was one of those relationships that was kind of forming in the background that I never imagined would become the collaboration it's become. But he was writing and acting and wanted to make things, but was also similar to me, like just sick of having to ask permission or sort of waiting to be told like, hey, your stuff is good, you should make stuff for us.
Yeah.
So we formed this like little, basically a band. And it was sort of our film school after film school, where we were doing every part of the process, from the writing to the craft service. I mean, it was like there wasn't a single thing that our hands weren't in. And it was all because we wanted to do it. We weren't making anyone else's shit. It was like we owned every single piece of what we were doing, and it showed. And it was why it was so distinct, and ultimately I think why we skipped these steps in the process.
And then you put together, VHS is a feature length film, right? Or is it a combination of
it's an anthology. It's a combination of shorts. It was like, we're gonna just do the thing that we've always done and hope that it connects, and like maybe 100 people will see it, and that will be enough, and that will be justification for what it's going to take to actually get it made.
But then Sundance changed your life.
Mm-hmm.
I bet.
Totally. And I think
having a big premiere like that it gives people the confidence in you to be able to make things and make cool, great things. And I remember it was a huge success. So you must have had so many doors open to you after that. So tell me about your creative evolution. I mean, we talked about like our career trajectories, but
yeah, I think that's a good question. I didn't ever really set out to. I mean, I always loved horror films. I was raised on the weird sci-fi movies and horror films. Alien and Terminator were like always playing on repeat in my house as a kid. And my parents were, really into movies, and so I grew up on a mix of very sort of strange and eclectic films. And it's funny. I was actually thinking Animal Automaton, the movie that you gaffed we're still photographer on. That's kind of a genre movie. At the end of the day, it's sort of like a Frankenstein story. But for me, I mean, I actually my start early on was in comedy, and what I found with Chad, Matt, and Rob, with those guys, was that there was something really exciting to me about the collision of genres and sort of mashing up various tones and finding a way to kind of create something that's totally unique by sort of subverting your expectation of what the genre is going to be. So those early projects of ours were all, I think, in their DNA, they were like action adventure stories that were about these very average, normal people who were presented with a set of circumstances that they were wildly unprepared to deal with. So naturally very, very comedic. But what the short format, and really I think the kind of digital online format, allowed us to do was have those characters and the kind of larger action adventure ideas intersect with like real horror elements. Like there was always this sort of genre over delivery happening, where we kind of lure people in with this like very natural, grounded, like comedic sort of relationship or buddy drama or comedy, and then you hit people with this like big genre idea, and that just worked very well for us, and has continued to work for us. But I think that because because our origin was more in the sort of action comedy space, and it sort of evolved into this more genre space. We like, our net is very wide. I mean, Ready or Not is sort of the perfect intersection of all of those things. It's like,
which I watched. I watched it on a plane. I watched it on a plane. But Ready or Not is that like rare, scary movie that's funny and twisted. I mean, I could feel your sense of humor in it in such a big way. It was so fun for me to watch because I was just like, that's Tyler's twisted idea. I know it.
I think we'd be able to make a really earnest horror film. Honestly, I think it just wouldn't, we'd find some way of fucking that up and making it funny. Because that's just how, I think that is our, like, that's our special sauce.
Right.
Does that exist for you? Is there something that you find that like, no, this is going to work and this is how, and you have to over explain it, but what you realize is like, that's just what you sort of naturally bring 100%. To and how you approach a project?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I was never, and continue to not be interested in documentaries as like a way to, as an information vessel. You know, I'm just not interested and never was in talking head documentaries, expert driven documentaries. And, you know, unfortunately, I think that most people, when they think of documentaries, they think they're long, they're boring, and there's a bunch of people talking at them, you know? And I think because a lot of those types of documentaries have been made.
So what do you look for? What's the thing that's like,
well, I look for, you know, stranger than fiction. I look for, you know, real life stories and real life characters that you could never write. It's so rich, it's so good that you couldn't possibly, you know, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like American Factory, when I started talking to the directors, and I always ask to look at the raw material, because a lot of times these directors have like a promotional reel or something cut together and you can't really see the potential. You know, if somebody's already put it together for some other purpose. I really like to look at the raw material and see if it's something that I can work with, you know. And I think of myself and all documentary editors as sculptors or painters, where we are given all this raw material and it's our job to kind of bring the characters, craft the characters in a way that brings them to life and create narrative threads that give the story a propulsive feel and that sort of thing. And when I saw the raw material for American Factory, I just thought to myself, like when I saw the chairman for the first time, I was like, you couldn't write a better character. You could not, if you had a costume designer, this is what they would dress the chairman in, and this is how the chairman would walk, and this is how the chairman would talk. You know,
right. And they're so extreme that you might actually say, ooh, that's too far. Like we've got to dial back on the caricature.
Well, totally. And I had somebody tell me early on in my career that, you know, your documentary characters are your actors. And when they come on stage, it's your job as an editor to craft their performances. And, you know, I approach documentary, I think, very similar to how fiction editors approach material.
Right.
I just have a lot more footage to work with and no script. And so, you know, American Factory was over 1,500 hours of footage in 2 different languages.
That is unbelievable.
In 2 different languages and no script. And so the directors their access was insane. And that maybe is the number one thing I look for when I look for projects is what kind of access do the directors have?
Right.
Because if there is not the kind of access that like Steve and Julia had on American Factory, you're just not going to get the gold. And
yeah, so 1,500 hours of footage is actually, I mean, as daunting and as terrifying as that
but most of it is unusable, you know.
Sure,
like,
but you know that there's like
you have to mine.
Combing, that they're doing the work. They're capturing, or at least attempting to capture the gold. They're trying to find moments that are going to make the story.
And they know that they are going to shoot. The shooting ratio is going to be insane in order to capture those scenes that are like stranger than fiction.
There are no shortcuts to that.
There are no shortcuts to that, both making a film like that on the production side, and there are no shortcuts in the edit room. You know, there's no way we could have just like, it's not like you roll up with that much footage and you're like, here's the film we're gonna make. You know, we didn't know how much Chinese would actually be in the footage, how much of that world we would juxtapose with the Dayton world. And that was a real aha moment for me on that project when they went to China and I started watching everything they had captured in China. It was like, the film just opened up for me.
The scope just became,
It became so much bigger, I think, for all of us. And then the power of juxtaposition, the power of being able to go from China to the United States and to have that kind of access in these factories. That's just something.
Yeah, and to create those parallels, to tell those stories and to draw similarities between these two places that are on opposite sides of the world. And
and if you want to understand how the global economy works, you watch that film and you get it. And there's never once an expert that's telling you how, you know, what globalization looks like, you know. And you know, like American Factory was one of those rare films that had a lot of humor in it, you know, and I was like, any documentary that has humor, I'm all for, because I think these films need to be entertaining. They need to be engaging.
I love that though. I think that we have the same inclination of mixing drama and comedy. And I think ultimately what I have found is that it's just more honest.
Yeah.
I think there's this notion that for a movie to be scary, it has to only be that. For a story to be dramatic, it has to only be that. And I can speak just personally from my life, the moments where I'm the most scared and the most vulnerable, I also laugh easier. Right. And the moments where I'm laughing, it's easier to scare me. It's easier to pull the rug out from under me. And that, so that those things are, not only are they like the sort of collection of those emotions just a part of our everyday lives, but they're actually wildly complementary to each other as storytelling Absolutely. Tools. And I also will say too that crafting a scare and crafting a joke are like exactly the same thing. When you're building them in an edit or on the page, it's all about tension and release, and so it makes sense, I guess, that my pivot from comedy to horror was on a craft level was oddly like pretty natural. Like those things coexisted long before I could, I think, verbalize why they worked and why it felt natural for me. Those things were always a part of the same process.
I want to talk about something that I do think is very important in the production world, and similar, is that, you know, one of the hardest things about making these projects is the collaboration. Mm-hmm. You know, it's both what makes filmmaking so joyous. You know, it's what makes, you know, the friendships you make with the people you make films with and how they become family at the end of it all. You know, for me, that's created a really rewarding career. Like Steve and Julia are basically my family. I mean, we have shared meals, holidays, everything. And I could say that about all the directors that I've worked with. And, but making the film is very hard, and it requires a lot of compromise and you know, being patient with each other and like open communication and being able to resolve your differences. And you know, these are things absolutely. That we don't really talk about. But for me, you know, I think as I've gotten older and the more projects I do, a better collaborator I've become, if that makes sense. You know, I'm not so sure that I'm always right. And
but I think that's great, right? I mean, I think that the process for me, I think what you're talking about is friction. And I think that humans are sort of, we're not designed to seek that out, right? Like it's like those kinds of conflicts can be really uncomfortable. But for me, and I think that this is I think a muscle that you just use, and ultimately it grows stronger the more you do work. Yeah. I don't trust a process if people aren't saying no to me. Exactly. And I think getting comfortable with that is it's a huge thing to learn. And I think you only learn it over time. I also think there's something valuable about how friction forces you to become better at articulating your point of view, right?
Yeah.
That when you're in a debate about what the right idea is, sometimes you saying, well, I don't know why, it's just I like it, so that's why it should be this. That doesn't work. Like
No.
you need to, the conflict, that sort of conflict forces you to actually articulate why why your taste is what it is, why the choice is the right choice. And I think that's how ultimately it makes you better on the page. It makes you better in person. It makes you better with your actors. It makes you better with your DP, like all of those. When you are able to say, I feel this way about this thing, and which, by the way, sometimes you can't put like that. Sometimes it's an intuition and like it just is, and that's also totally fine. But knowing that that you have the vocabulary to express why the choice is right is such a valuable lesson to learn. And it's just something you only learn if there's that friction. Like I've worked on films. I've directed projects where you show up and people just say yes, and they're my least successful projects. They're the things that I don't. Yeah. Where and it's and on a relationship level, like those connections aren't as deep and as meaningful. And the project at the end of the day, you see that lack of friction in the actual material. Being willing to say, like, I don't have the answer. Like,
exactly.
I need help. We need this. This needs to be this is a collective decision that needs to get made because I don't know what's best. Or I think it's okay to do that. And I think that's what allows people to have ownership of the process, you know, and feel like they are like they're a part of actually shaping what it ultimately becomes.
Yeah. I mean, it's why filmmaking's so exciting, because you want everybody to be the best at what they do. And when you bring all those people together to make a film, it's like magic.
It's so exciting.
So exciting. Well, I'm excited for everything you are going to do beyond just
Likewise.
this next big project, which is going to be huge. Scream.
Well, I can't wait to see whatever happens next. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Well,
I miss you.
I miss you too. And man, let's get together when we can. All right. Well, good luck to you.
Yeah, same to you. Let's talk soon.
This was fun. And
it's good to hear your story. There was like so much about. I feel like we sort of zigzagged and like occasionally would kind of skip off of each other's lives. But I'm so proud of you. You've made so many amazing things.
I'm so proud of you, but I never doubted that you were going places. You were just one of those people at school where you're like, that guy's going places.
It was that crematorium doc.
It launched you.
It launched us both into the stratosphere. All right,
well,
Lindsay.
I love you. Good luck.
Love you too.
And stay in touch, okay?
Yeah, we'll do. You too.
Thanks. Bye.